Thank you for joining Detective Duo, your companion for stories of wit, charm, and quiet suspense, the kind Tommy and Tuppence might have uncovered in their early adventures. Subscribe for more of these mysteries, and let us know where you're listening from. The morning began with the soft rustle of letters sliding through the brass slot at South Audley Mansions, an ordinary sound that became extraordinary the moment Tuppence Beresford bent to gather them. Bills, invitations, advertisements, she murmured, sorting with brisk precision. Then her hand froze. One envelope, cream and expensive, bore her own handwriting. Not merely similar, identical. The looping T and sharp B were hers beyond doubt, but the date in the corner was 3 days ahead. Tommy looked up from his breakfast eggs with a grin. "What have you been up to now? Sending letters to yourself from the future?" "Don't be absurd." Tuppence turned the envelope over. The wax seal was unbroken, the paper faintly scented with her own stationery's lavender. She hesitated only a second before breaking it open. The note inside was brief and cold. "Stay away from the man in the blue carnation." The handwriting was hers, but not the voice. It lacked her usual dash and humour, carrying instead a stiff, deliberate precision. "Tommy," she said quietly, "I didn't write this." He leaned across the table, studying it. "My dear, if this is one of your jokes to liven up breakfast, it's working splendidly. Though I confess I'd have preferred marmalade to menace." She shot him a look. "I'm serious. I've never seen that paper before. And why would I warn myself about some flower-wearing man I've never met?" Albert, their long-suffering man of all work, entered carrying toast. "If you start writing letters to yourself, Mrs. B., I'll put you down for 2 portions of pudding, 1 for each personality." Tommy chuckled. "There you have it, Tuppence. Scientific diagnosis by Albert." "Ha, ha," she said dryly. "You'll both be sorry when my future self turns up with a revolver." But despite the laughter, something uneasy flickered in her expression. She turned the letter over again, tracing the strokes of ink with her fingertip. Whoever had written it knew her hand intimately. After breakfast, Tommy wandered into the sitting room, humming as he examined the envelope under the light. No return address, postmarks blurred, but the ink, fresh, probably written last night. "By whom?" she demanded. "A mimic, someone who's been watching me write." "My darling girl, half of London could have seen you scribbling thank-you notes to the vicar's wife last week. Perhaps you've attracted a literary admirer." Her frown deepened. "It doesn't feel like admiration. It feels like surveillance." He was about to reply when the telephone trilled sharply. Tuppence lifted the receiver. "Beresford residence." A familiar voice crackled through. "Tuppence, dear, it's Lady Somerton. Do say you'll come to my charity garden fête this afternoon. I'm simply desperate for reliable guests. The committee has become quite frightful." "Of course, Lady Somerton," Tuppence said, softening. "Tommy and I will be delighted." "Splendid. And dress nicely. There's to be a flower competition. My cousin insists it brightens the proceedings." When the call ended, Tommy was watching her with mock solemnity. A fete, a flower competition, and a mysterious warning about a man with a blue carnation. Fate is giving you a nudge, old thing. She gave him a sharp glance. "You think we should go?" "I think," he said, grinning, "that when fate sends an engraved invitation, it would be rude not to accept." By mid-afternoon, South Audley Mansions was empty of its occupants and echoing faintly with Albert's tuneless whistling. The Beresfords arrived at Lady Somerton's estate outside London to find a scene of genteel chaos, marquees fluttering, tea-urns steaming, and a brass band playing slightly out of tune. Tuppence adjusted her hat with a determined air. "It all looks perfectly innocent." "Which," Tommy said, scanning the crowd, "makes it the ideal place for villainy." They joined the throng, greeted acquaintances, and made polite conversation. Lady Somerton, flushed and fluttering, greeted them effusively. "Tommy, Tuppence, how marvellous! Do admire my roses before they wilt. And the flower judge will arrive soon. Frightfully important man." As she chattered, Tuppence's gaze wandered. Near the tea tent stood a man in immaculate grey, his boutonniere a striking blue carnation. He caught her looking and offered a faint smile, courteous, unhurried, faintly mocking. Tuppence's hand tightened on her handbag. "Tommy." He followed her gaze. Ah, your pen pal, perhaps? Don't be flippant. He's exactly as described. Well, Tommy murmured, let's see if he's dangerous or merely fashionable. He excused himself, pretending to study the tombola while keeping the man in sight. Tuppence, meanwhile, engaged Lady Somerton in conversation. Who is that gentleman with the blue flower? Oh, Mr. Holden, I believe. Cousin Geoffrey's business associate. Quite charming, though rather intense. He's just handed me a note, actually. Lady Somerton gestured vaguely toward the tray beside her teacup. Tuppence's attention sharpened. The envelope there bore her name. May I? She asked lightly, masking the quick jolt of fear. Lady Somerton laughed. If you insist, dear. Perhaps it's another of your adventures. Tuppence slipped the envelope open. Inside, a single line. You've been warned twice. Her pulse thudded. Lady Somerton, did you read this? Good heavens, no. I assumed it was for you already. Tommy reappeared at her side. Our floral friend just left, hurriedly, hopped into a motor car and vanished before I could trip over the band's trombone. Tuppence handed him the note. He left this, for me. He read it, eyebrows rising. Well, that's considerate of him. Not many criminals issue warnings these days. Standards are slipping. Tommy, please, she said quietly. This isn't one of our usual larks. Someone's gone to extraordinary trouble to imitate my writing, to draw me here, to frighten you, he interrupted gently. You're not easily frightened, Tuppence. No, she admitted, but I am curious, and curiosity, as you know, is fatal to cats, and sometimes to Beresfords. They strolled toward the car, keeping their voices low. Behind them, laughter and music swelled as the band struck up another tune. Tommy said, If this Holden fellow wanted to warn you off, why not approach directly? Perhaps he already has, she murmured. Perhaps I met him once and forgot. Or perhaps he wants me to think I did. He opened the car door with a little bow. Then we'll do what we always do, my dear detective. Play along until the enemy grows careless. Tuppence paused before getting in. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. Bright, composed, curious. But for the briefest instant, she thought she saw another expression flicker there. Colder, calculating, a version of herself that might have written that first warning. She blinked, and it was gone. Tommy, she said softly, how well do you suppose anyone truly knows themselves? He smiled. In your case, not even you, my sweet, which is why life with you is never dull. As the car pulled away, the fate receded into the distance, laughter, bunting, and beneath it all, the faint scent of blue carnations clinging to the summer air like a promise. Back in the car, on the road to London, Tuppence sat very straight, the two notes in her lap, the first posted in her own hand, the second delivered under Lady Somerton's nose. So, it wasn't a coincidence, she said. He wanted a public setting, witnesses and an easy exit. Tommy nodded. And he wanted you to see him. The flower was a signal, not an affectation. Then he miscalculated, Tuppence said crisply, because now I've seen him, and I shall remember him. The fate dwindled behind them, all bunting and laughter and innocence. Ahead, London waited, and with it, whoever was so very good at wearing her handwriting. London had a way of making even familiarity feel faintly suspicious when one had been warned twice. The hum of traffic outside South Audley Mansions was the same as ever, yet Tuppence couldn't shake the sense that every motor car paused a second too long, every newspaper boy's glance lingered a beat too keenly. Tommy, sprawled in his armchair with the morning paper, glanced up as she paced. Darling, you'll wear a trench in the carpet. If our mysterious correspondent meant to frighten you, I'd say he's succeeding admirably. It's not fear, she replied, tapping her cigarette impatiently into the ashtray. It's annoyance. Whoever is behind this is playing a very personal game. Then let's consult someone who enjoys games of a darker nature. Tommy folded the paper. I've sent a wire to Mr. Grant. MI6 Grant? The very same. Owes me a favour from the Lisbon business. 2 hours later, the Beresfords were ushered into the quiet efficiency of a government office tucked above a tea importer's in Pall Mall. The faint aroma of bergamot did little to soften the starkness of the room or the man behind the desk. Mr. Grant, tall and silver-haired, rose with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Tuppence Beresford, still as inquisitive as ever, and Tommy, still pretending you're retired." Tommy grinned. "Retirement's dull unless someone's threatening us." Grant gestured to the chair opposite. "I received your note and the copies you enclosed. You were right to be cautious." He spread Tuppence's 2 mysterious letters across the desk. Under the lamplight, the ink gleamed with an unsettling precision. "It isn't forgery in the usual sense," Grant began. "Whoever did this didn't simply copy your handwriting. They mimicked your style. The rhythm of your hand, the natural inconsistencies. That requires observation, not imitation." Tuppence frowned. "Meaning they've been watching me write?" "Quite possibly. And it fits with other chatter we've heard. There's a network operating through London. Forgery, blackmail, espionage. Targets mainly those connected to wartime intelligence. Familiar names, familiar habits. The game seems to be personal." Tommy leaned back. "So, we're not just dealing with a crank. This is deliberate. Deliberate and dangerous." Grant's gaze flicked toward Tuppence. "You may have been chosen as bait." Tuppence met his look evenly. "Then let's make sure whoever's holding the line gets hooked instead." Grant smiled faintly. "You haven't changed." Back at South Audley Mansions that evening, the atmosphere was uncomfortably taut. The flat, usually their sanctuary, felt subtly invaded. Even Albert's cheerful clatter in the kitchen couldn't dispel the sense of eyes watching from somewhere unseen. Albert appeared at the door, drying his hands. "Beg pardon, ma'am. That same chap was nosing about outside again." Tuppence straightened. "The same one?" "Yes, ma'am. Second time this week, but I don't trust a man who checks pipes without a wrench." Tommy set down his glass. "Description?" Albert scratched his head. "Ordinary sort. Cap, overcoat, carried a clipboard. But he had the look of someone memorizing instead of mending." Tuppence grabbed her coat. "If he comes again, Albert, stall him. I want to have a word myself." An hour later the chance came. As dusk pooled along the street, Tuppence saw him, a thin man by the railings, pretending to examine the meter box. She stepped briskly out, voice light but firm. "Good evening. I hope our gas isn't causing you too much trouble." He started slightly, fumbling his clipboard. "Just routine inspection, miss." "Oh, then perhaps you can show me your identification." His eyes darted left. "Office sends the cards, miss. I just—" "Inspect, yes. You've said that." Tuppence moved closer. "Perhaps you'd care to tell me which office you represent." For one split second his composure cracked. Then he bolted, a blur of motion down the pavement. "Tommy!" she shouted, but he was already out the door, giving chase. They lost him near Grosvenor Square. He vanished into the evening crowd like smoke. When they returned, breathless, Albert stood on the steps holding something triumphantly aloft. "Dropped this, he did." A small leather notebook, battered but unmistakably valuable. Tuppence took it carefully. Inside, the pages were filled with sketches, rough, quick, yet precise. The facade of South Audley Mansions, their window, the shape of their balcony. On one page, a small, neat signature, S.H. An artist, Tommy wondered aloud. "Or a spy who sketches his work instead of photographing it," said Tuppence. "Look here, he's drawn me." It was true. Among the lines of brickwork and lampposts was a faint outline of a woman standing at the window, her hair swept back, her posture unmistakable. Tommy exhaled. "Whoever S.H. is, he knows us well." Tuppence turned the pages slowly. Amid the architectural notes were odd symbols, arrows, initials, and what looked like a map fragment. But one page in particular caught her eye, an unfinished sketch of a woman's face, delicate and intense. "She looks familiar," she murmured. Tommy peered closer. "Yes, but where have we seen her?" "She could be anyone," Tuppence said, though she didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe she's me, his distorted version of me." Albert crossed his arms. "If that's supposed to be you, ma'am, the man wants spectacles, eyes all wrong." Tommy laughed softly, though the humour didn't reach his eyes. "Still, it's a decent red herring. Suppose we assume the artist is a woman. S.H. Sylvia, perhaps?" "Possible," Tuppence said, "or a deliberate misdirection. Our friend may be clever enough to leave us looking in the wrong direction entirely." She closed the notebook with a snap. "One thing's certain. He's been close enough to draw what he saw. We'll need to be cleverer still." That night, she couldn't sleep. The noises of the city drifted faintly through the open window, the whistle of a distant cab, the rhythmic clatter of hooves, the occasional burst of laughter from the street below. All ordinary sounds. And yet she imagined footsteps pausing just beyond the railing, eyes lifting toward their window. When she finally dozed, her dreams were filled with sketches, shifting lines forming faces, her own voice whispering from the pages, "Stay away from the man in the blue carnation." Morning came grey and sharp. Over breakfast, Tommy laid the notebook on the table beside the toast rack. "Grant's sending a man to collect this. I'll wager the initials SH tie to one of his dossiers." Tuppence buttered her toast thoughtfully. "You know what bothers me most, Tommy? That someone's impersonating your impeccable stationery. That they know me well enough to get it right," she said quietly. "Too well." He met her gaze. "Then we'll smoke them out, darling. No one studies at Beresford without learning the hard way how unpredictable we are." Albert appeared at the door again, holding the Morning Post. "Another envelope, ma'am. Same paper as before." Tuppence took it, heart hammering, but this time it was blank. No message, no writing, no clue, but the faintest trace of perfume. She exchanged a glance with Tommy. The game's begun in earnest. Outside, a milk cart rattled past, and somewhere down the street, a door closed too softly to be casual. The cosy walls of South Audley Mansions suddenly felt smaller, the lamps a little too bright. What had always been home now held shadows, and somewhere within those shadows someone was watching, smiling, and waiting for their next move. That afternoon, while Albert was sweeping the hallway and Tuppence was pretending to tidy her desk rather than worry, an envelope slid under their door. "Postman must have missed the box, Mrs. B," Albert called. Tommy looked up from the newspaper, eyebrows arching. Another admirer, or another warning? Tuppence took the letter warily. It was cream, thick and scented faintly of sandalwood, far too elegant for circulars and far too ominous for comfort. She slit it open. "Lady Somerton's cousin requests the pleasure of your company at a literary soirée to express gratitude for your kind assistance." She read it aloud slowly. Tommy leaned back. "Gratitude? From that family? Either she's developed a conscience or it's a trap. My money's on the trap." Tuppence's eyes gleamed. "Naturally, which is why we're going." He sighed. "You know, most people avoid being bait. We seem to take it as an invitation to dress for dinner." "Precisely," she said cheerfully, already reaching for her notebook. "If they've gone to the trouble of inviting us, they'll expect us to be on guard, which means the real trick will be pretending we're not." The Somerton townhouse in Chelsea was a study in old money and quiet decay, parquet floors gleaming under candlelight, portraits glaring down from walls heavy with dust and pride. Servants moved like shadows, discreet and polished, refilling brandy glasses and lighting cigars. The literary soirée turned out to be a curious mixture of high culture and low gossip. A young poet in tortoiseshell spectacles was reciting something about celestial longing, while a portly colonel muttered to his wife that it all sounded like plumbing gone wrong. Tuppence took it in with amusement. "If there's one thing worse than espionage, it's amateur verse," she murmured. Tommy handed her a glass of champagne. "Still, poetry may have its uses. People let down their guard when they think they're being clever." "Then you'll fit in perfectly," she teased. He grinned but stayed alert. Years of marriage had taught him that Tuppence's light tone always preceded trouble. Their hostess, Miss Edith Somerton, a severe woman with pearl earrings and a voice like chilled gin, greeted them warmly. "My cousin tells me you were quite the heroine at the garden fete," she said, taking Tuppence's hands. "Such presence of mind. We all owe you thanks for calming poor Lady Somerton." Tuppence smiled modestly. "I'm afraid all I did was fetch her some water." "Nonsense. You prevented a scene." Miss Somerton's eyes glittered with curiosity. "And, I gather, attracted quite a bit of attention from our mysterious guest." Before Tuppence could reply, a familiar voice cut in smoothly. "Ah, but attention is something Mrs. Beresford inspires effortlessly." It was him, the man in grey, the blue carnation still vivid against his lapel. "Mr. Holden," Miss Somerton said, with faint triumph. "You've met, I believe." "Briefly," said Tuppence, her tone perfectly poised. He smiled, a fraction too wide, too knowing. I must apologize for our earlier encounter. One can't be too careful these days. The world of art and the world of secrets often overlap in the strangest ways. Art and secrets? Tommy asked mildly. You make them sound like partners in crime. Holden chuckled. Aren't they? Both depend on illusion and timing. There was something theatrical about the man, from the way he gestured to the way his gaze flicked between them. His confidence bordered on arrogance, but there was calculation underneath it, as though every word was weighed for reaction. Tuppence kept her tone light. You mentioned art. Are you a collector, Mr. Holden? Of sorts. I appreciate beauty, particularly when it conceals intelligence. His eyes lingered on her for a second too long. You worked in intelligence once, didn't you, Mrs. Beresford? The air between them tightened. Tuppence's smile didn't falter. Goodness, the things people say. I can barely manage household accounts. Ah, he said softly. Then I must be mistaken. Though someone remarkably like you was seen in Tangier, in 45, red hair, steady aim, and an unfortunate knack for uncovering deception. Tommy intervened with a genial laugh. My wife's most dangerous weapon is her rolling pin, old man. Tangier, indeed. We were honeymooning in Torquay that year. Holden inclined his head. Of course, my mistake. But his smirk said otherwise. Later, as the evening unfolded in a blur of chatter and smoke, Tommy moved easily among the guests, listening for whispers. He caught fragments, art shipments, forgeries, lost intelligence files, all innocuous until placed together. Tuppence, meanwhile, found herself cornered by Holden again near the bookcases. I must thank you, he said softly. You've saved me considerable time. Have I? She replied coolly. I don't recall offering assistance. By attending tonight, you confirmed exactly what I needed to know. And what's that? That you don't yet understand the game you're in. Her gaze was steady. Enlighten me. He smiled faintly. I never explain my methods, only my results. Before she could retort, Miss Summerton appeared, flustered, announcing that the pianist would play a nocturne. Holden bowed and withdrew, melting into the crowd. Tuppence watched him go, unease coiling in her stomach. There was something deliberate in his words, as though he were testing how much she remembered rather than what she knew. When Tommy rejoined her, she whispered, He claims to know me, from Tangier. Tommy's eyebrows lifted. That's original. I suppose next he'll say you spied for Napoleon. But his levity faded as he saw her expression. You think he means it? I think, she said slowly. He's telling half-truths to see which half I'll deny. By midnight, the party had thinned. The last of the portly colonels were herded toward the door. The poet had collapsed happily against a statue, and the air smelled of cigars and spent curiosity. Miss Summerton bade them farewell with mechanical charm. Such an extraordinary evening, don't you think? Everyone seemed quite charged with excitement. Electric, said Tommy. I dare say we'll all need rewiring in the morning. They stepped out into the cool night. The street was quiet, the lamps casting long shadows across the pavement. A car engine purred somewhere nearby, but didn't move. Tommy, Tuppence murmured, glancing over her shoulder. Do you feel we're being watched? I've felt that since breakfast, he replied. It's getting almost companionable. They reached their car. Tuppence opened her handbag for the keys and froze. Inside, folded neatly atop her compact, was a small note. The third warning will be final. The handwriting, hers again. Tommy took it from her, jaw tightening. We were searched. Not searched, tested, she said. He wanted us to find it, to know he could reach us even in a crowd. He looked up and scanned the darkened street. So, what's his endgame? If he wanted to harm you, he's had chances. If he wanted to scare you, he's already succeeded. Tuppence tucked the note back carefully. He wants something else. Proof, perhaps. Or confession. He's trying to convince us we've forgotten something, or someone. They drove home in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. The lights of London flickered past, theatres closing, taxis splashing through puddles, silhouettes crossing bridges. Finally, Tommy said, It's personal. You can feel it, can't you? Yes, she said quietly. Someone out there thinks I owe them and intends to collect. At the corner by South Audley Mansions, she caught a glimpse of a figure standing beneath a lamppost, tall, still, face obscured by shadow. The blue carnation glowed faintly in the light before the man stepped back and vanished into the dark. Tommy parked the car. "He's making his rounds," Tuppence exhaled. "No, Tommy, he's drawing a circle, and we're in the centre." Inside, Albert met them at the door, yawning. "All quiet while you were gone, Mum, except someone rang once and didn't speak." "Did they leave a message?" asked Tommy. Albert hesitated. "Sort of. There was a whisper, just one word. Mirror. Then the line went dead." Tuppence met Tommy's eyes. "Mirror?" He nodded grimly. "Time to reflect, perhaps. I'd say we've officially stepped into the looking-glass." The fire in the hearth had burned low. Tuppence stood by it, holding the warning note under the lamplight. The paper caught the glow, the ink shining faintly violet, and as she tilted it, she saw it. Faint impressions beneath the words, as if someone had written something else before erasing it. She traced the lines carefully. Letters emerged. S.H. She straightened, eyes widening. "Tommy, I think I know what our next move is." He smiled wearily. "You always do. Just promise me next time it involves tea and not blackmail." She folded the note with precision. "Not tea, dear. A trap." It began, as many ghosts do, with dust. Tuppence was in the spare room, coaxing open a cedar trunk that had not seen daylight since before the war. The lid groaned, and the scent of camphor and thyme drifted out. Old uniforms, brittle letters, a box of medals that no longer glittered. She had meant only to tidy, but something compelled her to dig deeper. At the bottom, beneath a stack of Red Cross newsletters, lay a photograph in a cracked silver frame. The edges were smudged, the image yellowed, but two faces still stared back at her, one her own, smiling with the unguarded warmth of youth, the other a woman with calm eyes and a mouth that looked ready to defy the world. Sylvia Hartwell. Tuppence sank onto the bed, holding the frame carefully. "Tommy," she called, her voice thinner than she intended. "Come here a moment." Tommy appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, spectacles perched precariously on his nose, the picture of mild domestic disarray. "If you found another spider, I resign from marriage immediately." "Worse," she said. "A memory." He joined her and took the photo, whistling softly. "Well, well, you both look disgustingly young, and that uniform rather suits you, though I'd have voted for shorter hems." She ignored the jest. "Do you remember Sylvia?" "The name rings faintly of scandal." "It should. She was accused of selling intelligence to the Germans during the last months of the war. I swore she was innocent." "And was she?" Tuppence hesitated. "I thought so. She was clever, precise, impossibly calm, the sort of woman who never lost her head, but people said she used her Red Cross work as cover to send coded reports. When they questioned her, she vanished. I always assumed she fled abroad." Tommy handed the photo back gently. "S.H." Her eyes flicked up. "What did you say?" "The initials from the sketchbook, Sylvia Hartwell." For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet felt thicker than the London fog that pressed faintly against the window panes. Tommy broke it first. "So she may be our artist, or at least the reason someone's using her name. Either way, the ghost of Miss Hartwell seems to be walking again." Tuppence rose abruptly, pacing. "If it is Sylvia, then she's the one sending those letters, or someone wants me to think she is. But why now, after all these years? Revenge, perhaps, or remorse." She turned the photo over. On the back, written in Sylvia's firm handwriting, were 4 words. "For Tuppence, my reflection." Tuppence stared at them for a long time. "She used to joke that we looked alike," she murmured. "Once at a dance someone mistook me for her. We laughed about it for weeks." Tommy's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "So she was your mirror girl." That made her look up sharply. "What did you say?" "Mirror, girl, like the painting title from the gallery you mentioned in Holden's Circle." Her pulse quickened. "You think it's connected?" "I think," he said, "we'd be fools not to find out." The Kensington Gallery was the sort of place that pretended not to care about wealth while charging absurd prices for the privilege of appearing cultured. Its rooms were hushed, whitewashed, and filled with the low hum of conversation from patrons who wore their curiosity like a fashion accessory. Tommy and Tuppence arrived mid-afternoon, the air scented faintly of polish and lilies. A woman in black gloves greeted them with a professional smile. "Welcome to the Holden collection," she said. "We're featuring several post-war pieces, portraits, symbolist studies, a few rather striking mirrorscapes." "Mirrorscapes," Tommy repeated. "Sounds like something one might fall into and never return from." The woman smiled politely but did not answer. They drifted through the exhibit. Paintings gleamed under controlled light, landscapes that shimmered like heat, faces that hovered half-real within pools of shadow. Tuppence moved quietly, her attention drawn toward a smaller room off the main gallery. And there it was, the Mirror Girl, oil on canvas, signed with the faint looping H of Holden. The figure in the painting stood before a mirror that reflected not her face but someone else's. Same hair, same eyes, yet different, colder. The resemblance was unmistakable. Tuppence's breath caught. "Tommy, it's me." He came to stand beside her. "It's uncanny," he admitted. "The tilt of the head, the look, everything but the smile. You look like you're about to confess to something dreadful." "I never sat for this." Her voice was quiet but steady. "And yet—" A voice interrupted behind them, smooth as silk. "Curious, isn't it? How art sometimes sees what people choose to forget." They turned. It was the gallery manager, the same man who had slipped Tuppence the letter at Lady Somerton's fete, now dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit. "Mr. Holden," Tommy said evenly, "we meet again. Do you specialize in painting likenesses of strangers, or just in unsettling married couples?" Holden smiled faintly. "Only in revealing truths others prefer to leave buried." Tuppence studied him. "You painted this?" "I did, from memory." Her tone sharpened. "You and I have never met before last week." "Not you," he said softly, "but perhaps the woman you once were." Tommy took a step forward. "Enough riddles, Holden. What game are you playing?" Holden's eyes flickered between them. "It's not a game, Mr. Beresford. It's restitution. Some debts demand to be paid, whether in money, loyalty, or blood." And before either could reply, he inclined his head politely and walked away, leaving the scent of clove cigarettes in his wake. Tuppence stared after him. "He's mad." "Possibly," Tommy said, "but lucid madness is the most dangerous kind." She turned back to the painting. Up close, she could see details that hadn't been obvious before, faint etchings along the edge of the mirror, tiny initials almost hidden in the paint. S.H. She traced them with a trembling finger. Again, S.H., she whispered. So it wasn't just the sketchbook, it was always Sylvia. Tommy frowned. Then Holden didn't paint this alone, or perhaps he didn't paint it at all. A gallery attendant approached. "Excuse me, madam, are you interested in acquiring the piece?" Tuppence managed a tight smile. "Not yet. I'm merely deciding whether it's a portrait or a threat." Outside, the daylight had dimmed into early evening. The traffic hummed, the air was damp with the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Tommy hailed a cab, but neither spoke as it rolled through the London streets. At last he said, "You're thinking about her?" Tuppence nodded. Sylvia was brilliant, but reckless. She believed rules were for people with smaller imaginations. During the war, she used codes hidden in charity rosters, fund lists, things no one would question. They said she passed information to the enemy. I defended her. I knew she wouldn't betray us. "But what if she did?" Tommy asked quietly. Tuppence turned toward him, eyes bright. "Then why spare me? I vouched for her. If she betrayed her country, why send warnings now?" "Perhaps guilt," Tommy said. "Or perhaps someone else is using her ghost to frighten you into silence." "Silence about what?" He hesitated. "That," he said finally, "is what we'll have to find out." Later that night, the Beresfords sat before the fire. The photograph of Sylvia on the table between them. Tuppence traced the frame absently. "You see, Tommy, the tragedy of reflection is that it shows everything except what's behind the glass." He poured 2 brandies. "And you think someone's using that reflection to reach you now?" "Not just me," she said softly. "Us. The letters, the painting, the initials. They're bait, yes, but also breadcrumbs. Whoever is behind this wants me to remember Sylvia, to remember something I shouldn't have forgotten. Tommy swirled his glass. What if she's alive? Tuppence looked into the fire. Then she's been living in my shadow all along. There was a knock at the door. Sharp, polite, deliberate. Albert appeared, flustered. Sorry, Ma'am, but this just came by hand. He held out a small envelope. Tuppence opened it. Inside was a clipping from that morning's newspaper. The headline read, Former war nurse linked to art smuggling ring. Below it a grainy photograph. Sylvia Hartwell, unmistakable. Scrawled across the clipping in black ink, The Mirror Girl Remembers. Tuppence's hand tightened on the paper. Tommy, she whispered, the past isn't haunting us. It's staging a comeback. He met her gaze over the firelight. Then we'll give it an encore. Outside, the city murmured with the secret rhythm of night, footsteps on wet pavements, taxis gliding through lighted streets, and somewhere in the dark, the faint echo of a camera shutter closing. The photograph of Sylvia gleamed faintly on the table, as if its silver frame had caught the memory of a flash. The telephone rang just as Tuppence was scribbling down notes on the back of an envelope, the sort of inconsequential detail that later turns vital in any mystery. Tommy, polishing his pipe with the exaggerated patience of a man pretending to be calm, lifted the receiver. Beresford residence. No, Mrs. Beresford isn't here. Oh, she is? How inconvenient. Tuppence snatched it from him. This is Mrs. Beresford speaking. A woman's voice, low and deliberate. You're interested in purchasing the Mirror Girl, I believe. Tuppence froze. Perhaps. May I ask who's calling? I represent the artist. We prefer discretion. If you're sincere, come to the gallery at 3:30, alone. Before Tuppence could respond, the line clicked dead. Tommy raised an eyebrow. Well, darling, you've finally achieved what every husband dreads, being courted by the criminal classes. It's an invitation, she said thoughtfully, and invitations, as you know, are irresistible. The afternoon air was brisk, the kind that sharpened thoughts and chilled fingertips. The Kensington Gallery looked different in daylight, the charm of candlelit soirees replaced by sterile precision. Its glass doors reflected Tuppence's image as she entered, composed, inquisitive, faintly amused. The manager wasn't there. Instead, a woman stood by the far wall, gloved, veiled, and still as a statue. Her black dress fell in sharp lines, and the faint scent of violets lingered around her. Mrs. Beresford, the woman said, her voice muffled by the veil, I appreciate your punctuality. Tuppence smiled lightly. I was told I'd be meeting the gallery manager. I'm afraid he was detained. I've taken his place. And you represent the artist? In a sense. Tuppence studied her. The woman's accent was faintly continental, her tone clipped and careful. But there was something else, something familiar. You've seen the painting, of course, the woman continued. It's rare that art so closely imitates its subject, or its subject imitates art. Tuppence met her gaze through the veil. You know me. A pause, then quietly, you owe me. She reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. The paper was ivory, unmarked, sealed without signature. Tuppence hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single line written in a hand she knew too well. You owe me my life. Her pulse quickened. Sylvia. The woman stiffened, barely, but enough. You are Sylvia, Tuppence pressed, after all this time. But before she could take a step forward, the woman retreated. No, she said sharply. I represent her. That is all you need to know. Then tell me where she is. The woman turned, gliding toward the door. You'll find her when you stop looking for her. But be warned, Mrs. Beresford. Curiosity once saved you. It won't again. And then she was gone, moving swiftly into the street. Tuppence followed, heart pounding. She reached the pavement just in time to see the veiled figure vanish into a waiting taxi. Taxi! She cried, flagging another. Follow that cab, quickly! The driver grinned. Always wanted to hear that, miss. The chase wound through Kensington, past Hyde Park, then into the maze of Bloomsbury streets where the shadows deepened and traffic thinned. Finally, the lead taxi stopped before an inconspicuous building near Russell Square, a grey house with shuttered windows and no sign above the door. The veiled woman stepped out, glanced once around, and disappeared inside. Tuppence paid her driver and ducked into a nearby doorway, watching. When the street emptied, She hurried to a phone box on the corner. "Tommy, Bloomsbury, Russell Square. Bring your courage and a torch." By the time Tommy arrived, the afternoon had turned to an uneasy dusk. The house stood silent, its windows like closed eyes. "She went in there," Tuppence whispered. "Hasn't come out." Tommy eyed the building. "Safe house, I'd wager. Wartime sort. We use similar ones for courier drops." "Then we'll see what secrets it's still keeping." They slipped inside through a side door left carelessly ajar. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and oil. A clock somewhere ticked, steady and deliberate. "Clever," Tommy murmured. Anyone who lived here once knew the value of silence. They moved carefully from room to room, drawing room, kitchen, study, all stripped bare. But in the back room the air changed. The faint hum of electricity buzzed, and the light from a half-drawn curtain revealed something that made Tuppence stop. Pinned across the walls were photographs, dozens of them. Their faces stared back. Tuppence at the grocer's, Tommy locking their door, Albert leaving the post office. Some were taken from across the street, others from within their flat. One showed Tuppence at her desk, pen in hand, head bowed over stationery, writing a letter. Her letter. She stepped closer, her throat tightening. "They've been watching us for weeks." Tommy examined the photos with grim precision. Different angles, different equipment. Whoever did this knows his surveillance, but here... He pointed to a stack of folders on the table. "Look at the markings, MI6 file numbers." Tuppence's eyes widened. "Grant?" Tommy's voice hardened. "No, wait. It could be forged. But why his code prefix? Unless he's involved," she finished quietly, "or someone wants us to think so." A sound from the corridor made them both turn, the creak of a floorboard, faint but unmistakable. Tommy motioned for silence. They waited. The air felt thick, the silence almost tangible. Then a door banged somewhere below, and footsteps fled down the stairs. Tommy was already moving. "Stay here!" Tuppence ignored him, following. They reached the ground floor in time to see a shadow dart through the side exit. Tommy gave chase into the narrow alley behind the house, but by the time he reached the street, the figure was gone. He returned moments later, breathless. Lost him. Or her. Tuppence held up a small object she'd found near the door, a glove, black silk with faint stitching on the inside cuff. ES. Tommy frowned. Not Sylvia Hartwell, then. Unless she's changed her initials. Or she never was SH to begin with. They exchanged a look. The case that had started with imitation now seemed to be imitating itself. Back at South Audley Mansions, the tension in the flat was almost visible. Albert had prepared tea, but none of them drank it. Tommy paced by the window. So, someone who knows Sylvia's history, our history, and the intelligence networks. Someone with access to Grant's file codes. And a photographer's patience, Tuppence added. Those pictures weren't rushed, they were observed. Albert, hovering awkwardly, cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but when I was out this morning, I saw a gent hanging about by the lamp-post again. Said he was with the utilities. Only what?" Tuppence prompted. "Well, he had one of those new cameras, the kind you hide in a cigarette case." Tommy exhaled. "That settles it. Our enemy isn't just following, he's documenting, building a record." Tuppence looked down at the envelope from the gallery, the one that had said, "You owe me my life." "If it is Sylvia," she said softly, "then perhaps she's repaying the debt the wrong way around." Tommy stopped pacing. "You saved her once, didn't you?" "In Lisbon," she said after a pause. "She was cornered, accused of passing messages through aid convoys. I vouched for her, risked court-martial to get her cleared." "And if she was guilty?" Tuppence shook her head slowly. "Then I freed a traitor." Tommy's tone softened. "You couldn't have known." "No, but someone else did." That night, Tuppence couldn't sleep. The photographs haunted her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself frozen in those still frames. A woman observed, dissected, catalogued. At 2 o'clock she rose and went to her writing desk. The letter from Sylvia, or whoever had written it, lay beneath the lamp. She studied the handwriting again, her own heartbeat loud in the quiet room. Then she noticed something she'd missed before. Faint impressions beneath the words, barely visible under the light. She tilted the page, and a new line appeared. invisible ink catching faintly under the glow. He watches from within. Her breath caught. "Tommy!" He appeared in the doorway, tousled but alert. "What is it?" She handed him the paper. "Look." He read the hidden message, his expression tightening. "Within, meaning here." Her gaze flicked toward the wall, the wardrobe, the mirror, the ceiling vent, all potential eyes. Tommy moved to the vent, unscrewed the grate and reached inside. His hand emerged holding a small metal box no larger than a matchbook, a wire still attached. "A microphone," he said grimly. "Our flat's bugged." Tuppence sat down slowly. "He's been listening. Every word." Tommy pocketed the device. "Then we'll give him something worth hearing." She met his eyes and smiled faintly. "You mean to bait the trap?" "Exactly. Tomorrow we let it slip that we've discovered who's behind it all. If our watcher's still listening, he'll make his move." "And when he does," she said, rising, "we'll be waiting." Outside, the city stretched toward dawn, still, watchful, unaware. From across the street, a man in a grey coat stood beneath a lamppost, cigarette burning faintly in his hand. When the light in the Beresfords' window went out, he smiled to himself and flicked the cigarette away. The ember hissed softly against the wet pavement. The bell rang 3 times, slow, deliberate, and altogether wrong for any decent hour. Tommy was halfway out of his chair before the 3rd chime faded. He caught Tuppence's eye across the sitting room. Her knitting needles were still in her hands, the half-finished scarf sliding soundlessly into her lap. "Not Albert," she said quietly. "No," Tommy agreed, already moving toward the hall table. "Albert rings like a man racing the devil. This sounds more like an appointment with him." He opened the drawer, withdrew his revolver, and checked the chamber with that brisk calm Tuppence always found half maddening and half reassuring. "Tommy," she warned, "careful." "I intend to be. You take the upper landing. If this is one of our midnight admirers, let's at least give him a polite reception." The air in South Audley Mansions felt heavier at night, still, echoing, the sort of silence that hears itself breathe. Tommy opened the front door slowly. No one. Just the corridor stretching away under the weak glow of gaslight. Shadows pooled near the stairwell like spilled ink. Then he saw it, a small parcel resting neatly on the doormat. He knelt, gun ready in one hand, and lifted the parcel with the other. It was heavier than it looked, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Across the top, written in firm black ink, were the initials TRB. Tommy frowned. "That's me." He brought it inside, setting it on the table as Tuppence came down the stairs. "I don't like parcels at midnight," she said. "They rarely contain good news." "True," Tommy admitted, "but curiosity has killed more cats in this household than burglars ever have." He tugged the string loose. The paper fell away to reveal an antique mirror, oval, gilt-edged, its glass slightly fogged with age. Across the back, an engraving shimmered faintly under the lamplight. 2TRB, my reflection. Tuppence drew in a breath. That phrase again, reflection. Tommy turned it over. "Do you suppose it's meant literally?" "Nothing in this case has been literal so far," she said. "Let's see." They carried it to the writing desk. Tommy fetched a small screwdriver. With careful pressure, he loosened the mirror's backing. The lining peeled away, revealing a folded slip of paper hidden beneath. He smoothed it flat on the desk. "Cipher text," Tuppence murmured. "Numbers, letters, a simple transposition perhaps." Tommy squinted. 12.3, B, 4.6, R. Oh, splendid. Midnight arithmetic. Tuppence had already reached for her notebook. "No, look, coordinates. Grid references. It's a railway code." Tommy's head came up. "Railway?" "An old system from the war," she said, excitement quickening her voice. "Agents used them to mark rendezvous points. 12.3B would be line 12, platform 3, section B. Tommy, it's pointing to an old station, Millway Terminus." "Closed since 1942, he said grimly. "If someone wants us there, it won't be for the scenery." Tuppence looked at the mirror again. The faint distortion of its glass caught both their faces in reflection, his sharp and wary, hers calm and intent. "Tommy," she said softly, "we have to go." He sighed. Of course we do. The streets were empty as they drove through London, the city holding its breath between one day and the next. A few distant lights burned in the upper windows of hotels and offices. The rest of the capital slept uneasily, unaware that a war of smaller ghosts still waged in its alleys and forgotten places. Millway Terminus loomed ahead, a derelict shell of steel and stone crouching at the end of a side street. Rusted gates stood ajar. Inside, the concourse yawned into darkness, the tracks gleaming faintly under the spill of moonlight from broken skylights. Tuppence tightened her scarf. I remember coming here once to see a convoy off to Dover. The place feels haunted. Tommy adjusted his torch. Perfect spot for a trap, or a confession. They moved in silence down the platform, their footsteps echoing off the high roof. Then, movement. A figure stepped from the shadows near the ticket booth. The torchlight caught a pale face, calm and composed beneath a black hat. Tuppence froze. Sylvia! For a heartbeat, neither woman moved. Then Sylvia Hartwell smiled, that same poised, knowing smile Tuppence remembered from 20 years ago, when war and secrets had bound them together. "Tuppence Beresford," Sylvia said quietly. "You always did arrive precisely when expected." Tommy kept his revolver low but ready. "If you're a ghost, madam, kindly state your intentions. If not, kindly explain why the world's most elusive woman is leaving mirrors on our doorstep." Sylvia's gaze flicked toward him, amused. "You've married well, my dear." Tuppence stepped closer. "They said you were dead. You vanished after Lisbon." "I had to," Sylvia said simply. "When they turned on me, your precious intelligence men, your Mr. Grant among them, I had no choice. Better a living traitor than a dead innocent." Tommy frowned. "So you were accused?" "Accused, not guilty," she snapped. "But innocence is an inconvenience in our line of work. They needed a scapegoat. I was convenient. I disappeared." "Then why come back now?" Tuppence asked. Sylvia's composure wavered. "Because the man who destroyed me has found a new target. You." "Holden," Tuppence said. Sylvia nodded. "He was one of us once, an artist, a forger, a double dealer. He helped me vanish, then built his empire out of my shadow. He uses faces, identities, reflections. You were his next masterpiece." Tommy's grip tightened on his revolver. "So the letters, the mirror, all to draw her in." Sylvia's eyes gleamed. "Yes, he's using you as bait. He knows I can't resist saving the woman who once saved me." Tuppence's breath caught. "Then the notes." "Were mine," Sylvia said, "until he intercepted them. I've been trying to reach you before he did, but it seems I was too late." A sudden clang echoed through the station, metal striking metal somewhere in the shadows. All three froze. "Tommy," Tuppence whispered. He swung the torch toward the far end of the platform. The beam cut across a row of derelict carriages, empty windows staring like hollow eyes. Nothing moved. Then, from the darkness, a voice, smooth, cultured, unmistakable. "Ah, the old team reunited. How very touching." Holden stepped into view, a pistol gleaming in his hand, the blue carnation still pinned absurdly to his lapel. Sylvia's face went white. "You. Did you really think you could hide forever, my dear Sylvia? I built your legend. I can end it too." He turned his gaze on Tuppence. "And you, Mrs. Beresford, you were supposed to be my final portrait. A perfect imitation of conscience." Tommy's voice was sharp. "Drop it, Holden." Holden laughed. "Oh, come now. You of all people should appreciate symmetry, Mr. Beresford. You saved your wife once in Lisbon. Shall we see if you can do it again?" His arm rose, steady as steel. Tommy fired first. The sound thundered through the station. Holden ducked behind a column, the shot sparking off metal. Tuppence darted forward. "Sylvia, get down!" But Sylvia didn't move. She turned toward the noise, eyes wide with something like resignation. A single shot rang out. Sharp. Final. Sylvia staggered. For a moment she remained standing, hand pressed to her chest. Then she went down hard on the platform. "Tuppence!" Tommy shouted. "Go!" Tuppence snapped. "Get him! I've got her!" Tommy tore off after Holden into the tunnels. Tuppence dropped to her knees beside Sylvia. The blood was bad, but not yet gone. Sylvia's eyes flickered, fighting. "Hold on," Tuppence said. "You're not dying for his secret." Sylvia's lips moved, but the words were faint, too faint to catch. Tuppence pressed her handkerchief to the wound and looked toward the dark where Tommy had vanished. "Hurry, Tommy!" For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the wind through the broken glass above. Tommy touched her shoulder gently. "Tuppence." She looked up at him, eyes glinting. He killed her to silence her, but she left something. The note in the mirror, it must point to him. He helped her stand. "Then we'll find it. But first, we call Grant. The Yard's men can take her from here." Tuppence nodded. "Yes. It's time the war's unfinished business came to light." Outside the station, the night had begun to thin. A pale suggestion of dawn brushed the rooftops, indifferent to what had transpired below. Tommy guided Tuppence toward the car. Behind them, Millway Terminus stood silent again, another forgotten ruin hiding its ghosts. As they drove, Tuppence turned the mirror over in her lap. The cracked glass caught her reflection, two faces superimposed, her own and faintly Sylvia's. She whispered, "You didn't die in vain, old girl. We'll finish it." Tommy's hand brushed hers briefly. "And when we do?" "Then," she said, "we'll buy a new mirror, one that only reflects the living." But neither of them looked back, because both knew that somewhere, unseen, another mirror was already watching them. The gunshot still rang in Tommy's ears as he lunged forward through the echoing gloom of Millway Station. "Tuppence! Stay with her!" he called over his shoulder. He didn't wait for an answer. The fleeing figure had darted between the derelict platforms, a blur of motion swallowed by shadow. The moonlight fell in broken patches through the cracked glass ceiling, throwing stripes of silver across the old rails. Somewhere ahead, a door slammed, followed by the sharp scrape of boots on concrete. Tommy vaulted a fallen bench, heart pounding. The scent of oil and dust stung his nostrils. His torch beam cut a narrow path through decades of neglect. "There's nowhere left to run," he shouted. A laugh drifted back, soft, mocking, unmistakably Holden's. "Oh, come now, Beresford. Don't spoil the symmetry of our evening. You're supposed to be the gentleman detective, not the hunter." Tommy moved cautiously past a row of abandoned carriages. Their windows were dark, their interiors silent, but for the faint drip of water somewhere within. He caught movement, the gleam of a pistol raised, a shadow shifting. He fired once, the shot shattering glass. Holden ducked, returning fire. Sparks leapt from the iron pillar near Tommy's shoulder. Tommy dropped behind a bench, teeth clenched. "I preferred it when criminals used daggers," he muttered. The echo of footsteps resumed, fading toward the maintenance tunnels. Tommy followed, moving in bursts, hugging the walls. The air grew colder, denser with the smell of damp earth and rust. Then, suddenly, silence. He stopped. His pulse thundered in his ears. Ahead, the tunnel forked, left into darkness, right toward a faint glimmer of light. A trick, perhaps, or a trap. He turned right. The light came from a hanging lantern, one of Holden's own. It dangled from a hook, swaying slightly. Beneath it, a single blue carnation lay on the ground. Tommy's jaw tightened. "Leaving calling cards now, are we?" A noise behind him, a whisper of fabric, the scrape of a shoe. He spun, pistol ready, but the space was empty, only the echo of his own breath. And then, faintly from the shadows, "Don't look for me in the dark, Mr. Beresford. I live in reflections." The voice dissolved into the echo. By the time Tommy reached the street above, Holden was gone. Only the night remained, a cold, indifferent witness. When he returned to the platform, Tuppence was kneeling beside Sylvia Hartwell's motionless form. Her hands were steady, though her face was pale. "She's still breathing," Tuppence said softly, "but not for long." Sylvia's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at Tuppence, not with fear, but with a strange, exhausted calm. "I told you. He wouldn't stop," she whispered. "I thought if I stayed dead, it would end." "Hush," Tuppence said. "You'll be all right. Help's coming." Sylvia smiled faintly. You never could lie convincingly. Her hand trembled, reaching toward the shattered mirror Tommy had dropped earlier. "The mirror? In the frame," she gasped. "That's where the truth is." Then her fingers fell still. Tuppence bowed her head. "Goodbye, Sylvia." When Tommy touched her shoulder, she didn't flinch. "She's gone," he said quietly. Tuppence nodded. But she left us the last piece. An hour later, back at South Audley Mansions, the flat was a pool of lamplight and exhaustion. The mirror lay on the table, beside their notebooks and the recovered sketchbook from Bloomsbury. Albert hovered by the door, pale but eager. "I called the yard, sir. They'll check the station, though I don't fancy they'll find anyone by now." Tommy nodded. "Thank you, Albert. Get some rest." When he'd gone, Tuppence stood by the fireplace, staring at the mirror's cracked surface. "The mirror in the frame," she murmured. She must have meant more than metaphor. Something hidden, something he thought destroyed. Tommy picked up a penknife. "Let's find out." He pried carefully at the edge of the gilt frame. Dust and splinters fell away, revealing the wooden backing. Underneath, faint traces of pigment clung to the wood, red, green, ochre, as though something had once been painted there and then scraped away. "Painted over," he said slowly. "But why hide a painting inside a mirror?" Tuppence leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Unless it wasn't a mirror to begin with, unless it was the mirror girl. He blinked. "You think—" Holden. The painting was the key. He must have concealed his real signature beneath the top layer, used the piece to smuggle information or even stolen art. Sylvia must have found out. Tommy fetched a small lamp from the desk and tilted its beam across the surface. Under the light, the glass caught and refracted faint lines beneath the varnish, curved strokes, half-hidden initials emerging from the shadows. Holden's name. There it was, faint but legible. "Got you," Tommy said softly. Tuppence exhaled. "He painted over his own crime, quite literally." "And tried to frame you in the process," Tommy added grimly. "All the letters, the mimicry. He was building a narrative where you'd seem complicit in Sylvia's fall." She folded her arms. "So I become the final chapter in his masterpiece, a reflection of guilt he could destroy. Not if we end his show first." By morning, they were on Lady Somerton's doorstep. The dawn light slanted over Belgravia, painting the quiet streets with brittle clarity. The butler, visibly unsettled by their unannounced visit, ushered them into the drawing room. Lady Somerton appeared moments later, pale and fluttering in a dressing gown that had seen better days. "Mrs. Beresford, Mr. Beresford, what on earth—" Tuppence handed her the mirror. "Recognise this?" Lady Somerton blinked. "Why, it looks like one of the pieces Holden lent me for the soirees. He said it was from a private collection." Tommy's tone was calm but sharp. Holden's private collection was assembled through theft, forgery and blackmail. You've been hosting a smuggling ring under your own chandelier. Lady Somerton gasped, a hand flying to her throat. "Impossible! He is, a gentleman." "Indeed," Tuppence said dryly. "A gentleman who uses polite company as camouflage. He forged connections as deftly as he forged signatures." Tommy set the mirror on the table, angling it toward the window. He painted over original works, embedded messages in the underlayers, then shipped them abroad under legitimate names. When Sylvia Hartwell discovered the scheme, he silenced her, and when Tuppence defended her, she became his next loose end. Lady Somerton sank into a chair, trembling. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," Tuppence said gently. "He's good at making people see what he wants." Tommy's gaze swept the room. Where would he go next? He wouldn't run far. Too vain to vanish completely. Lady Somerton hesitated. "He kept a small studio on the river, near Battersea. Said it was for privacy." "Perfect," Tuppence murmured. "Where better for a man obsessed with reflections than by the Thames?" The river lay quiet under a bruised sky when they reached Battersea. The tide lapped softly against the pilings, carrying the scent of oil and salt. Holden's studio stood at the end of a narrow quay, a warehouse converted into elegance, its windows curtained, its door locked. Tommy picked the latch with a hairpin from Tuppence's bag. She watched, approving. "You've kept your bad habits, dear." "Marriage improves many things," he said, pushing the door open, "but not that." Inside, the space was immaculate. Canvases stacked in neat rows, a half-finished portrait on an easel, and the faint chemical tang of turpentine. But what caught their attention was the far wall. Dozens of small mirrors, each framed identically, arranged in a precise grid. Every mirror reflected the room, and them. Tuppence stepped forward cautiously. "He's been watching himself." Tommy examined one. The glass was new, but behind it, faint outlines of brushwork. He's using mirrors as smuggling panels again, probably swapping originals and copies right under customs' noses. Then Tuppence saw it, a single mirror tilted at an odd angle, its reflection misaligned. She reached out, touched the edge, and it swung inward on a hinge. Behind it, a safe. Tommy grinned. "You do have a gift for finding trouble." "Luck," she said modestly, "and female intuition." He worked the dial. Within minutes the door clicked open. Inside lay a stack of documents, coded shipping manifests, letters, even a passport in the name of Edward Holden. The photo showed him clean-shaven, expressionless, with a different name beneath. Edward Grant. Tuppence froze. "Tommy, look." He took the papers, eyes narrowing. "Grant. MI6 Grant." "It's him," she whispered. "He was never helping us. He's been directing it all." Tommy's voice hardened. Holden was the alias. He used MI6 resources to run his operation, silenced anyone who threatened exposure. Sylvia must have uncovered his real identity. That's why he framed her. "And me," Tuppence said quietly. "The apprentice mirroring the master." They heard footsteps then, deliberate, echoing through the corridor outside. Tommy snapped the safe shut and turned to her. "Time to leave." The footsteps grew louder, confident, unhurried. But before they could reach the door, a voice spoke from the shadows. "Going somewhere, Mr. and Mrs. Beresford?" Grant, Holden, stepped into view. The blue carnation still pinned to his lapel, but now its petals were wilted, edges frayed. Tuppence's tone was cold. "You're late, Mr. Grant, or should I say, Edward Holden." He smiled faintly. "Both names have served me well. Unfortunately, yours have outlived their usefulness." Tommy levelled his revolver. "End of the road, Grant. Scotland Yard's already seen the files. You'll find reflection less forgiving behind bars." Grant's eyes flicked to the mirrors, as though seeking an escape in their glittering depths. For a moment, he looked almost weary. A man who'd built too many lies to tell which one he was in. Then he dropped the pistol he'd been hiding in his sleeve. It clattered across the floor. "Always the dramatist," Tuppence said softly. He laughed once, low and hollow. "Art requires an audience, and I've finally found mine." Within moments, the police sirens wailed along the river, slicing through the morning quiet. Grant didn't resist as they led him away. But as he passed Tuppence, he murmured, "You'll never escape your reflection either." She didn't flinch. "No, but at least mine tells the truth." Later, in the calm of their sitting room, Tommy poured brandy and raised his glass. To Sylvia, and to the last mirror breaking, Tuppence smiled faintly, and to reflections we can live with. The firelight caught the repaired mirror above the mantel, their own faces reflected there, side by side, steady and real. Outside, the city carried on, its secrets momentarily stilled, its reflections quiet once more. "Albert," said Tommy, polishing his spectacles with suspicious cheer, "if ever you have dreamt of theatrical glory, tonight you shall have it." Albert, standing stiffly in the doorway of the Beresfords' sitting room, looked alarmed. "Sir, if it's to be like last time, I'd rather not. I've only just stopped smelling of turpentine." "This one's simpler," Tuppence assured him, though her eyes glinted with the mischief that usually preceded chaos. "All you must do is stand near the drinks trolley, look decorative, and be ready for your cue." "My cue for what?" "To hit someone," Tommy said, matter-of-factly. Albert blinked. "Right. I'll fetch the heavy candlestick then." It had been 2 days since the Battersea studio affair. For about 6 hours, everyone at the yard thought Edward Holden, posing as Grant, was safely locked up. Then, just before the charge sheet was finalised, the key evidence couldn't be located. The yard had taken him into custody, but for reasons known only to bureaucratic whim, the files they'd handed over had gone missing en route to evidence storage. Tuppence had known what that meant. Holden was still out there, moving in the cracks. So tonight's plan was simple: bait the trap with vanity. Word had been discreetly leaked, through one of Tommy's less reputable acquaintances at the club, that Mrs. Beresford intended to sell the Mirror Girl to an eccentric collector known for acquiring controversial art. The collector's townhouse was, in reality, a borrowed property in Mayfair lent by a friend of Lady Somerton's, who thought the idea of hosting a secret sting perfectly frightful but rather delicious. The house itself was all polished parquet and gilt-framed landscapes. The dining room had been transformed into a small exhibition space, with the mirror girl placed center stage on an easel beneath perfect lighting. The painting glowed faintly, its eerie resemblance to Tuppence lending the scene a dreamlike unease. Tommy adjusted the placement of a nearby vase by half an inch. Everything must look authentic. Criminals are sticklers for atmosphere. Tuppence, standing beside the painting, smoothed her skirt. "And I suppose I'm the evening's tragic heroine." "You do play it beautifully," he said. "A dash of moral courage, a trace of vulnerability," she interrupted crisply, "and a revolver in my handbag." "Precisely." The appointed hour struck. The clock in the hallway chimed 9, each note carrying a strange finality. Albert, stationed discreetly behind the velvet curtain, gave them a nervous thumbs up. The lights were dimmed to an intimate glow. Moments later a knock sounded, 3 times, deliberate and steady. Tommy opened the door. Holden, or rather Edward Grant, still perfectly turned out despite his fugitive status, stepped inside. His blue carnation was fresh again, as though defiance itself bloomed daily. "Mr. Beresford," he said pleasantly, "I wasn't expecting such a formal reception. Or are we still pretending you're merely an intermediary in this little sale?" "Appearances matter," Tommy replied, "as you well know." Holden's eyes swept the room, landing on Tuppence and the painting. For an instant his expression softened, admiration tinged with something colder. "Ah," he murmured, "the lady and her reflection. One can never tell which is real, can one?" Tuppence met his gaze evenly. "The reflection doesn't shoot people in abandoned stations," he smiled thinly. "You surprise me, Mrs. Beresford. I'd have thought you of all people understood that truth and illusion are often interchangeable. After all, you forged a few letters of your own once, didn't you? In the service of the Crown, of course." Tuppence stiffened, but Tommy's voice cut in smoothly. "We're not here for reminiscence. The painting's ready. Shall we discuss the price before or after you explain why it was worth killing one woman and nearly killing another to keep?" Holden tilted his head. "2? I only recall one, and she was rather persistent in her habit of being alive." Tuppence's temper flared. "Sylvia died to expose you." "Did she?" His tone was almost tender. "Or did she die because you defended her? Because your misplaced loyalty painted a target on you both?" Tommy stepped between them. "Enough." Holden ignored him. His gaze held Tuppence's like a mirror catching light. "You and I are not so different, Mrs. Beresford. We both lived in the shadows of stronger men. We both learned the art of imitation. But the difference is, I embraced it. You still pretend to be the innocent reflection." For a moment, silence. Then Tuppence smiled, a small, knowing smile that could have belonged to any of the women he'd underestimated. "Reflection," she repeated. "Yes, that's what Sylvia said. And perhaps you're right. Reflections can be dangerous." She reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. "Do you recognize this?" Holden's eyes narrowed. "The letter you sent to me, forged in my own hand," she said. "Only this isn't your version. This is mine. I made a copy. Ink, paper, watermark, everything. Perfect enough that even you would struggle to tell them apart." Holden's poise faltered for a fraction of a second. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Tuppence stepped closer, holding the letter just within his reach. "The police already have the original, but if you'd like to examine your handiwork—" His hand twitched. Tommy, watching from the edge of his vision, tensed. Holden's expression changed from irritation to something feral. "You meddling amateur," he hissed. "Do you think you can win by imitation? That's my art, not yours." His hand darted inside his coat. "Tommy!" Tuppence shouted. But before Tommy could move, Holden's pistol flashed in the lamplight, and then a solid thunk. Holden's eyes widened, his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the carpet, the pistol clattering away. Behind him stood Albert, clutching a silver candlestick like an Olympic trophy. "Beg pardon, sir," Albert panted, "but you did say to wait for my cue." Tommy blinked. "That was your cue indeed." Tuppence exhaled shakily. "Albert, you've just earned a week's holiday and a new suit." Albert looked down at Holden's unconscious form. "If it's all the same, ma'am, I'd rather stick to the gardening." The next moments blurred into noise and motion. The arrival of Inspector Marriott and his men, the clatter of handcuffs, the hiss of flashbulbs as the press arrived far too quickly for comfort. Holden came to just long enough to sneer. "You think this ends me? Reflections never die. They only change faces." Marriott ignored him, leading him away. When the last of the commotion faded, Tuppence sank into a chair beside the painting. Tommy poured her a brandy. "You handled that beautifully." She accepted it with a weary smile. "It's curious, isn't it? He spent his life trying to turn people into reflections, and in the end, he became one himself. All surface, no soul." Tommy looked at the mirror girl. Under the soft light, the painted face seemed almost serene now, the tension drained from its features. "Do you know," he said quietly, "I think the painting's changed." Tuppence tilted her head. Perhaps it was always meant to. Every mirror becomes honest in the right light. Later, after the police had gone and the house had quieted, the three of them stood in the doorway preparing to leave. Albert, still clutching the candlestick as if expecting applause, cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, about that week's holiday." Tuppence laughed. "Granted, just don't spend it near any art galleries." When they stepped outside, the night was sharp and clear. The city hummed softly, the comfortable hum of life returning to order. Tommy offered his arm. "Home?" Tuppence nodded. "Yes. And then, perhaps we'll hang a different painting. Something pastoral. Cows don't scheme," he chuckled. "But they do reflect quite nicely in ponds." She gave him a sidelong glance. "Tommy, if you start seeing clues in the livestock, I'm divorcing you for mental hygiene." They walked on, their laughter mingling with the distant sirens fading into the London night. Behind them, in the townhouse, the mirror girl still stood beneath its lamplight. For an instant, the faintest ripple crossed the surface of the paint. No movement, only illusion, a trick of glass and shadow. But if anyone had been watching, they might have sworn that the painted figure smiled. It was a Thursday morning, washed in quiet satisfaction. The sort of morning that smelled faintly of toast and calm triumph. Sunlight poured through the lace curtains of South Audley mansions, catching on the silver tea service that gleamed like a reward for good behaviour. Tommy was behind his newspaper, humming something unmusical. Tuppence, across the table, was sorting through the morning's post with the air of a woman determined to find peace and half suspecting it wouldn't last. Albert had just deposited the last of the letters when one envelope caught her eye. Cream paper, neat, familiar slant, her own handwriting. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then she laughed softly, a sound that was half amusement, half relief. "Well," she said, holding it up, "either the post office has begun delivering déjà vu, or I've taken up correspondence with myself again." Tommy lowered his newspaper. "I should have known you wouldn't let a little forgery keep you from making an encore." Tuppence slit the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet, typewritten but signed in her own looping hand. The words were brief and unmistakably hers, dictated apparently during one of her more introspective moods earlier that week. "Never let kindness blind you to deceit. Trust your heart, but let your head have the final word." She smiled faintly. "You see, Tommy, even I can take good advice if I write it down first." He folded the paper, eyeing her fondly. "You're impossible. You've just survived being impersonated by a murderer, and now you're sending yourself inspirational notes." "It's called emotional housekeeping," she said primly. "A woman must declutter her mind before she refurnishes it." Later that morning, Mr. Grant, the real one this time, still nursing the professional embarrassment of having his identity borrowed by a traitor, paid them a visit. He stood in the sitting room like a man hoping the wallpaper might forgive him. His bowler hat was perfectly brushed, his tie painfully correct, and his smile the kind that knows it's unwelcome but insists on surviving. "Mr. and Mrs. Beresford," he began stiffly, "I wanted to extend official thanks. The department has confirmed that Edward Holden, or as we once knew him, Edward Grant, was indeed a dismissed operative, a skilled forger, expelled for falsifying expense claims before disappearing abroad." Tuppence arched an eyebrow. "Expense claims? Hardly the grand scandal I expected." Grant winced. He refined his craft later. Ciphers, identities, artwork. The man turned deception into an art form, quite literally. Tommy poured him tea with measured courtesy. He nearly turned it into murder as well. "Yes," Grant said quietly. "And for that, I owe you both an apology. We should have recognized the signs sooner." Tuppence softened. "Don't be too hard on yourself. I've learned that forgers are like mirrors. They show you what you most want to see." Grant gave her a rueful smile. "Perhaps that's why you saw through him, Mrs. Beresford." "Oh no," she said lightly. "He nearly convinced me I was my own worst enemy. Fortunately, Tommy insists on playing knight-errant when I start doubting myself." "Occupational hazard," Tommy said modestly. "If I didn't keep rescuing her, she might start solving things without me." Grant finished his tea and rose. "The Yard has cleared Sylvia Hartwell's name officially. Her record will be amended. I thought you'd want to know." Tuppence's expression gentled. "She deserves that much. She paid enough for her silence." "She also left something else," Grant said, handing her a sealed folder. "A few of her notes, her personal account of the Lisbon affair. She named you as the only person she trusted." Tuppence accepted it quietly. "Then I'll make sure her story is remembered properly, not as gossip, but as grace under fire." Grant bowed slightly. "You both have my respect, though, if I may offer a small piece of advice." "Go on," said Tommy. Grant smiled faintly. "Try to spend at least 1 month without uncovering a conspiracy." After he left, the flat felt lighter. The shadows that had hung about their home these past weeks had finally receded, replaced by the domestic symphony of kettle, clock, and cat. Tuppence refilled the teapot, humming. Tommy watched her, amusement dancing behind his eyes. "You realize," he said, "that in the last fortnight you've been blackmailed, impersonated, nearly shot, and praised by the Secret Service." She looked up serenely. "I've had worse holidays." He chuckled. "If being the target keeps life interesting, you're going to have a very lively old age." "Oh, I don't mind," she said airily. "Perhaps I'll write myself another warning when things get dull. Something like, 'Beware of charming men offering tea.'" "Cruel," Tommy protested. "I'm the harmless sort." "Every villain says that until the third act," she replied. Albert entered just then with a tray of scones, looking smug. "The milk hasn't gone off, ma'am. That's a first for this week." Tuppence grinned. "Albert, you're the only man in London who can declare war on dairy and win." He looked faintly puzzled. "Thank you, ma'am. Shall I put the scones near the mirror or away from it?" Tommy groaned. Not the mirror again. But Tuppence laughed. "Let it stay. It's quite tame now. I think it's finally reflecting the right people." They all glanced toward the mantelpiece where the mirror girl hung quietly in its new frame. In the soft light of the room, the painted face seemed warmer, almost content, as if the ghost within had been laid to rest. That evening, after Albert had gone and the city outside settled into its twilight hum, the Beresfords lingered by the fire. Tommy reclined with the evening paper while Tuppence paged through Sylvia's folder. The rustle of paper and the occasional clink of teacups punctuated the cosy silence. At length Tuppence looked up. "It's strange," she said softly. "All these secrets, and in the end they collapse under the simplest truth. People lie out of fear, not malice." Tommy nodded. "Fear and pride, 2 sides of the same counterfeit coin." She smiled. "You're getting poetic in your old age." "I'm merely adapting to the company." He folded the paper, his gaze settling on her. "You know, I still can't decide whether you're luckier as detective or victim." She laughed, a sound of pure, restored mischief. "Oh, detective, always. Victims don't get the last word." "And you always insist on that," he said fondly. "I do," she admitted. "Though I will say, if this case has taught me anything, it's that kindness without caution is like tea without sugar, noble but dreadfully unsatisfying." Tommy raised his cup. "Then here's to kindness, tempered, not blind, and to reflections that tell the truth." Tuppence clinked her cup against his, and to being clever enough to listen when one's future self sends a warning. The fire crackled softly. Somewhere outside, a newsboy called the evening edition. In the comforting glow of their living room, husband and wife sat content, their laughter mingling with the ticking clock, that faithful reminder that peace, like danger, always came round again. For now, South Audley Mansions was safe, tea was hot, and all was well. Until, of course, the next knock at the door.